Hi, welcome to my evaluation video of the learning materials I created as part of the EDEC unit. The first thing I'll talk about is whether or not I faced any issues in matching the initial ideas I had to the completed courseware I created. Here I'd say that I ran into technical issues very early on when deciding on choosing a piece of software to implement my designs in. The issues I faced was either the software would not have the features that I wanted, which was the case of Weebly, with Weebly, or that in the case of on. Because of this, it was a rather frustrating experience initially. I wanted to focus on the content, and I didn't want to get into the coding aspect of web design. It was then that I managed to actually find the final design choice software, which was Wix, and it was a tool that offered me everything I was looking for in a software. In terms of how continuous evaluation was used throughout the design and implementation stages, I used the work of Dix and the chapter evaluation techniques in particular as inspiration. Dix states that evaluation should be a continuous process and also should be used to address any issues that may occur from an early stage. Well, to that extent, I held 4 separate testing sessions with a dedicated group of student testers. I decided to have the same group of students test the materials right from the outset to make sure that I managed to create a piece of learning material which would benefit my end users. What I'll do now is I'll actually talk briefly about the 4 stages that I went through as part of the testing. The first testing phase took place very early on. It was at the stage where I just designed some prototype paper designs, and I wanted to share them with my students just to get an idea of what their thoughts were. As you can see here, I managed to get some feedback which I've comprised into 3 main points. For the second testing phase, I actually took the prototype paper designs and started putting them on a piece of software. In this case, at this stage, it was Weebly. Now, after I created the learning materials and created the prototypes on Weebly, I again shared them with the group of testers. And these 5 stages and main aspects of feedback came about. Now, the main important one is the 5th step here, where I needed to have some form of interactivity in the form of the quizzes. This was an issue in Weebly itself, because Weebly 1 had limitations in the amount of pages that I could create, and 2, it wouldn't allow me to have the form of variety and quizzes that I wanted to incorporate. So although the learning materials were quite informative, they didn't have any kind of interaction design as part of them, and I needed to change that. But I couldn't do that using Weebly, so I then decided to go back to the drawing board, and that's when I discovered Wix. After I transferred my designs from Weebly to Wix and then fleshed the learning materials out more, I again had a testing session with the students as part of the 3rd testing phase. Now, the formatting and the issues that came about and came to light in the first 2 stages were fixed and sorted, and we were okay with that. We were happy with the way everything was coming along. But in my excitement, I actually incorporated a lot of quizzes on the learning materials and on nearly every single page, and I also incorporated a variety of different types of quizzes. Now, I was thinking that this would actually be helpful to the students and the variety would be interesting and motivating, but I didn't take into consideration that my students' literacy levels, both in English and ICT, were not to the level that they needed to be in order to do well in these quizzes. So as a result of the fantastic feedback I received here, I decided to go back to the learning materials and basically simplify the quizzes that I incorporated, as well as make it less tedious by not having as many quizzes on the learning materials. At this stage, I'd also like to talk about the influence of Sharp. Now, The 5 steps that are in blue at the bottom of the screen here acted as an informal mission statement for me. I printed those 5 steps and stuck them in my office, and I also shared them with the student group who were the testers for the learning materials. The purpose of doing that was that it reminded me of why I'm creating this learning material. The courseware was designed for students of a certain level. So I had to a certain extent, remain detached. And these 5 steps constantly reminded me of what I was creating and who I was creating it for. And it allowed me to never lose sight of what I was designing. And it was absolutely crucial. When I implemented everything in Wix, the final stage was just getting it checked. But at this stage, I also showed it to my department colleagues for the first time. And they checked it for consistency and usability, and it was at that stage that I felt happy with the actual learning materials and decided to go ahead and use it as part of the induction in January 2015. At this stage now, I'll talk about Nielsen's 10 heuristics for user interface design and how I evaluated my learning materials from that standpoint as well. I'd say that the materials were designed with simplicity in mind and kept as clutter-free as possible. The layout of the text and any quizzes were kept similar, again to maintain consistency. Regarding the match between system and the real world, the system was designed after thorough testing with the students who are similar in academic ability to the end users of the system. As far as user control and freedom was concerned, the materials were designed so that the students were not restricted in the order of viewing the pages. For the purposes of the induction, the students followed a rather linear design. Consistency and standards across the materials in terms of layout was fine, but I have to say that I could have been more consistent across the use of colors that I used for different text across the materials. So if I was to redesign the materials, that's definitely something I'd look to change. Error prevention, all the tabs opened onto the correct page and all the links worked without any issues whatsoever. Recognition and rather than recall was a stage when I wanted to ensure that each section was on each page, in the sense that I didn't want the students to go back and forth to try and find information regarding one specific area. This was again a key conscious design choice. Flexibility and efficiency of use. I didn't force the users to complete any quizzes in any order to proceed through the materials. I wanted them to have flexibility in how they were going to use the learning materials in the future. Aesthetics and minimalist designs. The materials went through a lot of aesthetic changes. Again, this was based on the 4 testing phases that I carried out earlier as part of the design and implementation stages. No errors were encountered during the help users recognize, diagnose and recover from error stage. And as far as the last stage is concerned in help and documentation, the materials were actually designed in a way where the students knew by the text on the pages exactly what stage they were on and where they needed to be and how long they had left to complete the materials. There was no actual help and documentation area included in the learning materials themselves. Now, before I move on to the next stage, I'd like to talk about an experience I had earlier on in the course when I evaluated a set of learning materials without any background or rationale behind why certain decisions were made. Expert evaluation, so to speak, was hard to conduct without me getting the full picture behind why something was created a certain way. In the same manner, the learning materials that I've used now are part of a blended learning environment. That was a purposeful design based on the current ability of the students. Gaines' 9 events of instruction helped me in conducting the session. What I found interesting here was that Nielsen's heuristics provided me with an excellent way of looking at the actual materials themselves and evaluating them from that standpoint, and Gaines' 9 events of instruction complemented the materials by providing me with a structure which I used in delivering the blended learning session. They went together like hand in glove. Now I'd like to talk about the work of Dix and Wilson as well, which was absolutely influential in the way I actually went about creating the learning materials. By that I mean that Dix looks at evaluation from a systems design perspective, whereas Wilson et al. Looked at the focus from a learner's perspective. Both were equally important to me right from the outset. I looked at it from the point of view that if the system worked like clockwork but alienated the students, then it held little value for everybody. But at the same time, if I created the courseware perfectly well and it was pedagogically sound, but it was broken in so many places, then it'd be so frustrating to use that it'd defeat the whole purpose of it existing in the first place. So I looked at both as equally important as each other and considered them both right from the outset. Now that helped a great deal when it came to actually implementing and going ahead with the materials. Finally, what I'd like to talk about is whether or not I feel as though I achieved my overall aims. Now, right from the outset, I wanted to design materials which use the academic literature and pedagogies I was introduced to as part of the course unit. But what I purposefully decided not to do was to restrict myself by following everything I'd read. I wanted to maintain a degree of creative freedom and use my own understanding of the culture and demographic that I've been exposed to for the last 5 years in Qatar. To that end, I would say that I would definitely say that the learning materials have benefited my users' experience and have helped them transition more seamlessly to their program of study here, which was the goal right from the outset. Thank you.